Okay, before I get into Against All Odds, I just want to give a quick thanks to roxy-laveau.org. They plugged a column I wrote for TNAWrestlingNews.com called The Unappreciated Knockout. You can read it on that site, or you can read it on TNAWrestlingNews.com. It's still on the main page. It was posted on January 30th, so just scroll down and it's right there. Anyway, Against All Odds 2009. Nothing earth-shattering on this pay-per-view, but there weren't any horrible surprises like the Kip James debacle last month, and that's something to be thankful for. First up, X Division title match, Alex Shelley and Eric Young. A lot of people were upset by this match. A lot of people wanted Sabin and Shelley again. I understand that. I also heard the argument that Eric Young doesn't wrestle X Division style, which I thought was a little bit overcritical. I mean, just because Eric Young doesn't normally wrestle that style doesn't mean he can't do it if he wants to. Anyway, I think Eric Young proved a lot of the naysayers wrong in this match. I thought this was a very strong match to open the pay-per-view. Probably the best match of the night, in fact, which makes it 2 pay-per-views in a row that Alex Shelley has pulled that off. So I think he's off to a great start as X Division champ, and I think hopefully he gets a good long run with the belt. Props to Eric Young, too. He went high risk a bunch of times, definitely turned it up a notch, and he delivered more than what we're used to seeing out of him. In fact, I'll go one better. That was probably Eric Young's best match that we've seen out of him in a couple of years that I can remember. Even if you were one of the haters who didn't want him in this spot in the first place, I think you had to be pretty happy with his performance. Another couple of things I liked about this match, there was no outside interference or overbooking, and Shelley might have faked an injury, but that's not against the rules. He won the match cleanly without cheating, and it was really refreshing to see that because the X Division was never about that stuff. And yeah, the heels would cheat to win sometimes, but it was always more about the fast-paced athletic competition than anything else. The heel doesn't always have to cheat to win. Sometimes the heel wins because he's just better, which is what happened here. And I suppose maybe I shouldn't say heel because the crowd seemed more into Shelley than Eric Young, even though Shelley was in full-on arrogant jerk-ass mode. But regardless, I like this match a lot. Very strong opener. Scott Steiner versus Petey Williams. For a Scott Steiner match, this was as good as we could have possibly hoped for. I think Petey pulled a solid match out of Steiner, and Steiner did his part too. He definitely worked harder than he usually does. I think that's because he was in there with Petey Williams. Steiner tends to give Petey more than he gives other guys, probably because they're friendly backstage. He bumped for Petey, he sold for him, he let him get in a lot of offense, and Petey actually controlled a good chunk of that match, and he looked strong doing it. So even though Petey lost, they did a good job getting over the point that he really had Steiner on the ropes for a while. And I'm not thrilled about Petey losing. I'm sure you're not thrilled about Petey losing, but he looks strong in defeat this time, and that gives him grounds for a rematch later. This Mojo thing was cool. Not what I was expecting. I guess they're going to have Joe go through the main event Mafia guys one at a time until Nash gets healthy, it'll be my guess. Brutus Magnus Open Challenge. Originally it was going to be Rhino as the opponent. I guess something happened at the last minute because Chris Sabin came out instead. I'm not complaining about that because Sabin as a replacement probably made this match a lot better than it would have been otherwise. This was a better performance for Brutus Magnus than he had in his debut last Thursday. Now granted, he was in there with a much better worker this time, and it's not difficult to have a good match with Chris Sabin. Still, Magnus, not sold on this guy yet. He's not great in the ring. He looks pretty green still, but he seems to have some potential, and his mic skills are not half bad. So he could develop into something maybe. I'm calling this guy a work in progress for the time being. Although, that medieval armor getup he came out to the ring with, that has got to go. It looked ridiculous. Just bad. Late 80s, early 90s bad. Get rid of it. ODB and Awesome Kong for the Knockouts title. Honestly, this could have been better. Other match at No Surrender was better than this. But we kind of expected that since Kong is working with a couple injuries. If you've ever had a bad back, you know how painful that can be. Anyway, ODB lost clean. I have to admit that surprised the hell out of me. I mean, I guess Kong is going to gut it out and put off knee surgery for a while. I can't help thinking that's a mistake. I mean, I thought putting the belt on ODB would have been the right thing to do right now. I mean, if Kong can't perform that well, then why keep the title on her? And beyond the fact that Kong's knee and back are hurting her right now, she's really got no other challengers. And Taylor, Roxy, and Daphne are feuding with the beautiful people, and with the way she got beat, ODB really has no grounds for a rematch. So I don't know what they're going to do with this, because they don't really have anyone else in place who can go for the title right now. So stay tuned for that one. Booker T versus Shane Sewell. Don't really have anything to say about this one. It was pretty pointless. But we were all wondering what the reason was for Booker T wasting his time with this, and now we have our answer. It was just a platform to bring AJ back with a bang and set up Booker T versus AJ Styles at Destination X. So I still don't like how they had the Shane Sewell match on a pay-per-view, but Booker T beating up Sewell and then getting surprised by AJ was a lot better than him beating up one of the frontline guys again. And the idea of Booker T feuding with AJ for the Legends title, now that's more like it, TNA. Thank you. Abyss versus Matt Morgan. This one's been getting a lot of criticism. I actually like this match. I mean, yeah, it was sloppy at times, but considering that Morgan just had shoulder surgery the day or two before, I thought he worked really hard. They managed to tell a good story where Abyss kept going for the hardcore implements and then getting stopped by one thing or another and then finally winning the match without them. I'm glad it worked out that way because one of the big problems that Abyss used to have was that he was going for the hardcore stuff way too often and all the spots were played out. So whenever they cannot go that route with him, it's a very good thing. They get points for effort. I definitely want to see a rematch when Matt Morgan's 100% because I think these guys could do a lot together under the right conditions. Tag title match, beer money, lethal consequences. I thought the match itself was good, but the crowd really hurt it in my opinion. I mean, just as we saw last month at Genesis, lethal consequences are not really getting over as a team. I do think they work well as a team, but the fans aren't taking to them. And that crowd was definitely more into beer money. I mean, they had Lethal getting beat on for several minutes, building up to him finally making the hot tag to Creed, but the audience didn't pop for it. So, while I do think they can work as a team, TNA needs to address their lack of fan reactions. The first thing they need to do is drop the Black Machismo gimmick. It was entertaining for a while, but the fans aren't reacting to it the way they used to. The gimmick is old. People stopped caring about it months ago. They need to drop the gimmick. They should have dropped it after Slammiversary, and the process of de-emphasizing it should have begun during the feud with the Dudleys. So the Machismo gimmick has to go. After that, maybe a heel turn might help. Beer Money turning babyface seems pretty inevitable at this point. They're still acting like heels, but they're getting cheered more and more. So maybe if they had Beer Money turn face officially and have Lethal Consequences go heel, it might work better. By that same token, I think the Motor City Machine Guns need to go back to being babyfaces. I mean, they play their heel role very well, especially Shelley, but the fans just refuse to boo these guys. I mean, when you're pushing Alex Shelley as a heel and him playing the arrogant heel in his match, but he's getting more crowd pops than Eric Young, then something's not working. When you got Don West and Mike Tenay going on and on about what despicable human beings the Guns are, while the crowd is chanting Motor City, then something's not working. And on Impact last week, you had Lethal and Creed getting their asses kicked by Beer Money, while Sabin and Shelley were just lounging in the ring like they couldn't care less, and the crowd still cheered for them more than Lethal Consequences. So I'd say, keep their cocky, arrogant attitudes, don't change anything about that because that's what got them over, just give them different opponents. Instead of being disrespectful punks toward the babyfaces, have them be disrespectful punks toward the heels. I think that's the way the writers need to go with those guys. Main event. Sting and Kurt Angle versus Sting and Kurt Angle and the Dudleys. Sting retains. I'm happy about that. I do agree that Sting is not a fitting champion at this point, and Kurt Angle would be a much better choice, but I want to keep the title off Kurt Angle for now, for the sole reason that he most likely has an upcoming rubber match with Jeff Jarrett. No offense to Jeff Jarrett, but this company needs to move forward, not backward. This was a better match than the main event of Genesis. I'm not going to say it was a great match because it wasn't, but they had a story going in and they told it with the match. In the end, it was all about sowing the seeds of dissent between Sting and Kurt Angle, and they accomplished that. Angle said they were going to keep the title with the Main Event Mafia, and they did. Sting pinned Brother Ray to keep the title, and yet Angle is still pissed off. So it was more about the story and the characters than the match itself. In that capacity, it was a success. The thing is, I'm getting tired of matches like that. Yes, it's important to have story development, but there's no reason you should not be able to deliver an awesome main event every month. And if you're so focused on the story and not focused on the match the story is leading up to, you're going to continue running into that problem. I mean, the story and the match have to be of equal importance. I mean, if it had been Joe and AJ in there instead of 3D, this match would have been incredible, and that was not the case. It wasn't awful, it wasn't atrocious, but for a pay-per-view main event match, it just was not good enough, just like last month. But overall, I was more or less satisfied with Against All Odds. If I have one complaint, it's that the whole show felt more like setup than payoff. And I understand TNA is trying out a new pay-per-view plan where they build up to 4 big shows a year, and that's a good way to go, but it's not an excuse to half-ass it the rest of the time. It kind of feels like that's where they were going for these last 2 months. So if Destination X ends up feeling more like a setup show for Lockdown, just like the last 2 pay-per-views were, I don't know how I'm going to feel about that. You know, presumably it means Lockdown will feel like a really big show, but you got more than 4 pay-per-views a year, and you cannot not bring your A game for all of them. So that's pretty much it. looking forward to Impact to see what they do with Samoa Joe. Hopefully they'll get him back on the right track as the sadistic engine of destruction he needs to be. So, I'll talk to you guys next week. Later.